this next edition of the Value Exchange podcast. I'm Annabelle Lambert, and I'm here with my regular co-host, Rob Pye. Say hello, Rob Pye.
Hello, Rob Pye.
We are delighted today to be joined by Pranay Sanklecha, who we first met behind the scenes, really, at the Social Value Conference, which is something held in the UK, all about social value, where Pranay was wonderfully kind and pointed out to Rob about a typo in his profile. To just point that out, and so Rob was able to correct it, which is a kind gesture. But Pranay has been building, I think, just over a year, I think, from the records I could dig out, building the philosophy practice based in Hamburg. But I think my summing up, and Pranay, you can correct me, is that this is about practical application of philosophy to help anyone think more deeply, more well about life, rather than an academic bent. And we have been, since his kind gesture, sort of met on 1, 2, 3 occasions, just looking to explore some mutually beneficial opportunities. But Pranay's story is a wonderful one that we've heard so far, and I'm sure we will hear more that we haven't heard already during this podcast. So Pranay, please do tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, why you are, and why you're doing what you're doing, and anything else you want to share.
Wow, just the small questions to start off with. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. We can get smaller.
Thanks. Yeah. All right. Yeah, thank you, Anna. Welcome. Thank you, Rob, too, for the invite. So about me, I'm Pranay. You summed up my work, my business better than I often do. It's exactly about that. It's about using philosophy to help people in the real world and not in the ivory tower. And what can I say about myself? I am Indian. I'm actually Indian with an Indian passport, but I moved to England at 13, and hence the accent, because I tried to fit in. And yeah, since then I've lived in Europe. So I've lived in England, Switzerland, Austria, now Germany, and I've done a bunch of slightly different things. I was talking to some people yesterday about what I did and what I've done professionally, and they tried to find a coherent thread and they couldn't. So I think it's hard for me to kind of sum up, what I've done, because I've done a bunch of different strange things that are unconnected to each other. I don't know. What else do you want to know about?
Where did the countries come from? What was that you've
right?
You've traveled
India
quite a lot. So just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, right. So India to England was, at 10, I was offered a scholarship to go to school in England, private school, Brighton College, just through coincidence. So someone came, the governor of Brighton College was in India. There was a school event at the school I was at. I did something. He was impressed. Got offered a scholarship. I went for a term, and then I cried for 4 months, pretty much, because I was just very young.
It's quite famous.
Typical public school.
Yeah, it just made me cry.
The headmaster's report is he's getting on very well.
That's right. It's a very sensitive child. We like to develop this quality. But then I went back, and then at 13, when I'd finished one sort of set of schooling in India, I got offered this scholarship again. And my parents, this was ages ago. This was before the world was as small as it is now, and before India was as developed or developing as it is now. And my parents thought it was a great opportunity for me, which it was. And so I went, and I did my A-levels. And so that was the first travel. The second travel, what was the second one? Oh, that was to Switzerland. That was because I was working in London. My girlfriend at the time had moved to Switzerland, and I didn't like my job, and I ended up getting depressed, actually clinically depressed, and I went to hospital and so on. And it was clear to me that for my health almost, I couldn't stay in London, and I had to leave. And I didn't know where to go to, but my girlfriend's in Switzerland, so I thought, okay, I'll go to Switzerland and see what happens. Austria was because I got offered a job in a PhD position, and Germany is because my wife, not the same girlfriend that I moved to Switzerland for, different one. My wife comes from Hamburg, and we decided to move here to be closer to family. Yeah.
Always sensible
wow,
when you're having
that's
small
quite
children.
a lot of travel.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more, Pranay, about your journey with sort of philosophy as to
I want to know why philosophy. Why philosophy?
why the philosophy practice?
And then
How have you come to this?
I don't know. I mean, for as long as I can remember, pretty much, I've always wanted to know how to live, how I should live. For a very long time, I don't know. I think it was this feeling of you get one life. I didn't want to be 80 and thinking, crap, I've spent 60 years just doing the wrong thing. I've just not. Yeah, I didn't want that feeling, and it's always mattered to me somehow. I don't know why. I think it's just something, I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea why, but it's always mattered to me. And and so then that drew me to philosophy in the first place. And then I went and actually studied it at Oxford, and I had the experience that I think many people have when they study things at Oxford or other places. They end up falling out of love with the subject that they study. You go there with big questions and big excitement, and then at the end of the 3 years, it's kind of you somehow university hasn't given you what you hoped for when you went there, when you study something like philosophy. It's my experience. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do something valuable with my time, and I decided to be a school teacher. So I thought, okay, I'll be helping people or I'll be teaching, and somehow it felt valuable to me. I did that.
Then you cried for 4 months, did you?
No. At this point, I made my students cry. The crying myself was 10 years in history. And then so it was this pursuit of trying to do something valuable. Didn't like the teaching. Looked around and thought, no, I don't want to do this. And just without thinking about it, ended up working in a trading company. And trading derivatives and commodities, and quite an evil company actually. I won't name them, but yeah, quite a bad company, like morally bad. And yeah, but I realize I'm not answering your question. I think the short form of philosophy, of why philosophy, is I think there are certain questions that really matter to me. So, how should I live? What is meaningful? What's good? What is it to be a good person? What should I be doing with my time? What is the meaning of everything? And these have always really mattered to me. And so I kept returning to philosophy. So even when I'd left sort of university, I would still read a lot, and I started a part-time master's at Birkbeck and so on. So that's the thing that drew me to it, the promise of a kind of wisdom, the promise of, well, maybe here I'll learn something about how I should live and what's really important and what really matters. Yeah,
does
maybe
does that help in terms of conceptualizing that? Do you see any wisdom that you might trip up along the way and find as sort of metaphorically a destination, or is the questioning helping with the journey?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you arrive at a station, or is it sort of asking questions all the time about, you know, who you are, why you are, where you are? Is that in of itself satisfying?
In and of itself, no. I mean, I've heard quite a few philosophers say this, that philosophy asks questions that can never be answered, but it's in the questioning that we have the value of philosophy. And I think that's a bit of a cop out. This is a minority opinion, but I don't. Yeah, it could well be wrong, but I feel like, well, if these questions matter, then it would be nice to have some kind of progress in answering them. I don't expect a full definitive answer or a fully satisfactory answer, but I feel that part of it's not just about the questions, because if you're continually asking the question and not getting anywhere, at some point maybe you should ask a different question or do something different. So yeah, and I remember now in a different context, this wise old man I was talking to him about, why do I always have the same problems in my life, right? Why do they always come back, like, in different forms? But 5 years later, here I am. I've tried X, Y, Z, and here I am dealing with fundamentally the same problem, right? Because there's something fundamentally in me that reacts and blah blah, has patterns, etc. And he said he sometimes thought of, in this case, it was kind of moral spiritual progress. He said he thought of it as one of those LPs. He said, you constantly feel like you're going around in circles, but imperceptibly it's moving, and then at some point, if you're lucky, it slips into its groove. But the process of it isn't a process of, okay, I'm going to my goal, I'm making these steps, etc. And that sometimes is how I picture philosophy when it's going well. That it's a constant working on yourself in a way. And if you're lucky, you get occasional periods or longer of, when something slips into its groove and the music plays. Yeah.
And there will be listeners who say, no, you just need to read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
The answer
Yeah.
43. All
Yeah.
the generative AI and all the rest of it. Have you found any equations that come to mind? Not equations, but just answers that to any of these questions that are you think are immutable. They're not going to change that much. It's not like, okay, this is a reality. I feel that in my coaching, my work, in my life, in my philosophy, I think these are truisms, or these are part of the natural order of things.
Yeah.
Sorry to ask.
No, that's fine.
Trivial questions.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm very hesitant to make that kind of claim, because one of the most important things that I've learned by studying philosophy is I could be wrong about anything. You kind of realize, you realize that you somehow have to not be skeptical. You still have to commit to something, but if you study it honestly, I think one of the things that you're impressed by is any of my beliefs could be false. It's hard to be really dogmatic about a belief if you've really intensely studied philosophy, I think. So yes, I'm hesitant to make such a big claim. But what I can do that maybe at least moves in that direction is I can talk about things that I find helpful, for myself, not even making a broad claim for all other people that I've worked with. So one thing that I find helpful is insisting on, when it comes to philosophical questions like meaning, for example, finding meaning, what is meaning, etc. I find it really helpful to insist on experience, and what I mean by that is when I thought about what is meaning, or how can I find value, etc. in living, there's a tendency to think of that quite abstractly, to like start playing around with concepts, to go, okay, well, meaning means this in language, what does it mean here, etc. And all of that is important and relevant. But I found it very helpful to insist on needing to anchor that in, okay, what are your experiences of meaning? Talk to me about a time or a moment when you felt value in the world. We can then go back and use concepts and principles and logic to interrogate these experiences. The experiences aren't infallible just because you've had them. So both poles are open to being questioned. But I guess because of the type of mind I have and the type of work I used to do, I used to live in the world of abstraction much more. And in that world, it's a very useful corrective to always say, no. Fine, very fancy, but tell me about your day today. If we're talking about well-being and we're talking about theories of well-being, tell me today, how have you felt? Just tell me that. Let's just talk through that. And then we'll see where that fits in. So that's almost a
I find,
method
just
thing.
to interrupt,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you've excited me.
yeah.
It's quite for me a more recent experience of that first person. How does it feel for you? When we've talked and worked in different areas of social value for 15, 20 odd years, of how you organize organizations, how you organize people,
Mm-hmm.
and we're increasingly obsessed about the first person stories, because getting it out of people in a way, the interview yesterday, it was like the emotional connection. It can then make so much more impact to other people when it comes from a first person experience. and and social value isn't, we believe, at the moment, might be wrong, very happy with, learning and being wrong, because but at the moment, our obsession is the personal stories. That this is where this series of value exchange comes, because we don't want to hear your abstractions. We want to hear your
Mm-hmm.
experiences,
Mm-hmm.
first person, your emotional
Mm-hmm.
connection with the
Mm-hmm.
pain and the pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And that people find that quite difficult. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
talking about myself. I don't. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to talk about my experience. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
comfortable. But
Mm-hmm.
that's where the emotional connections are. My
Mm-hmm.
childhood, my this, my that, my. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
take that, if I may, and I'll play that back.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. And
so what about? Go on, Pranay.
I mean, this may be an off-road regret, but in a way, we can do showing instead of telling. I mean, I've just talked about, and you just sort of said that you think the same, and about the importance of experience, of felt experience, of stories, personal stories. And yeah, this is the offer that I might regret. I mean, we can go there. We can. I can talk about my experience. You will have to sort of guide me in asking questions, but I'm happy to move away from abstraction. Abstraction often bores me a little bit, to be honest. So I think I've had so much of it. I've had my fill. So I'm happy for you, if you want to ask me pretty direct questions, and I'll answer them. And places where I don't want to, I'll just say I don't want to. But I'm happy to, yeah, to be as
Yeah, and so
open as
okay,
I
so
can.
when we're doing value exchange with people, we in that context of the first person, because value exchange is all
Mm,
about you. Um, it's where do you find energy? We
mhm.
both were sort of, or I was, you were, a little bit
I
like,
no,
oh,
I was
coming to the,
yawning too
you,
backstage. Yeah.
where do you find energy? How do you find energy? Where do you find it?
Hmm. Hmm.
Is it in this people
Hmm.
connection kind of? Is it
Hmm.
where do you find
Yeah.
it? Do you find sometimes solace in being alone,
Hmm.
that can be
Hmm.
energy giving?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have two levels of answers, and the first one is I find the immediate answer is I find energy in love. So, and I mean something quite simple by this. I mean my son, my 2-year-old son. Um, I just had lunch with my family earlier, and he was up the stairs, and I came to get him, and he was like, "Do you want to come and look at the train that I just built?" And I was like, "Yeah." And the delight on his face was just incredible. And that's energizing. So I get energy from things like that. I get energy from true human connection. So when you get a conversation or a fragment of a conversation, or sometimes not even with words, sometimes a look or a feeling in a room, where there's presence, where people are aware of each other, and they're turned to each other, and they're not hiding as much as we normally hide. And that is energizing. Um, I get energy from laughter. Um, yeah, I like laughing. I mean, so there's a bunch of these types of things, but the second level is, and maybe this is a bit counterintuitive, or maybe not. I don't know, but I've realized for me one of the biggest sources of energy is kind of accepting the state I'm in and working with it. So if I'm yawning or tired, one mode of dealing with it is to say I'm not and sort of power on through.
Right.
And that can work for a while. It's a bit like drinking coffee for me. You can do it for a bit. But I found the more I can kind of just go, yeah, I am yawning. And that's my mode of being in the world right now. And I'm still going to do all the things that I'm doing, but I'm going to do them in the way in which I currently am. So I'll go see my son, but I'm not going to fight the fact that I'm tired or I'm yawning or I feel whatever it is. And I found somehow that is energizing in a funny way. Or maybe put another way, there's a lot of energy that I spend, that I think many of us spend, trying to pretend that things are different to what they actually are. And when you can drop that pretense, suddenly you've got a bunch of energy flying around because you're not using it anymore to pretend, is my experience. So I find that a reliable source of energy whenever I can remember to access it. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Lovely. I love it. I'm getting off on your offer of asking me difficult questions. Okay.
Go
Yes,
for it.
okay.
Yeah.
So, Indian, East-West philosophical, moral, spiritual kind of underpinnings. Is there a sort of in terms of your experiences?
Mm-hmm.
And do you and also, being a globe trotter, sort of like around Europe, India to start with, any reflections on the cultural, things we might draw from the East, that we might, East to West, West to East, all part of one tribe of humanity?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you on the religious, spiritual
Yeah.
intersections to philosophy, to questioning, to morality?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just small things. Where are you on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll order. I mean, I'll respond kind of randomly, and hopefully an order emerges. So one, and again to come back to experience, one thing that I think has mattered to me is, so in India you grow up in a religious world, right? And by which I mean,
Are you religious? Are you religious, Pranays?
kind
Sort
of.
of.
I mean,
Yeah.
I I have a very religious temperament. I sort of, something in me yearns for, I don't know, something spiritual, something to do with God, something. Yeah. So if a religious temperament means a striving to approach a reality that is bigger, more beautiful, more important, I don't know, something greater than you, then I have this temperament. So in that sense, I am religious.
Spirituality of yeah.
In yeah, I also I I'm not. I don't. My parents are Jains, which is an Indian religion, but I'm not a practicing Jain. I'm not practicing anything, and so, but I'm also kind of worried or suspicious about, I don't know what to call it, spiritual shopping. Um, where you do a bit of, okay, well, I'll take this bit of yoga and meditation from here, and I'll do that there, and I'll do that there, and I'll construct this thing that hopefully, yeah, I don't know what it amounts to. I think for a lot of people, it's got the validity of it. It makes you feel better. It helps you deal with the world better, and that's a very valid thing. But I'm just a bit wary of it as a spiritual practice, because I suspect, without having any expert knowledge, that religious traditions incorporate some wisdom and experience, and that they work put together. So I feel instinctively, it's better to go and fully be a Christian with all the difficulties that involves and the problems that involves, or to go and fully be a Buddhist, or to go and fully be a Jain,
So, like, you
than to
can't be
mix and
half
match.
pregnant, is the
Yeah,
you
yeah.
sometimes
Somehow,
hear, don't you?
I wouldn't be able to argue that position, but I feel it. But anyway, to come back to the so yeah, so that's where I stand on spirituality and religion. I've had some, I guess you'd call them mystical experiences. They could have been experiences of anything, but I've had some, and yeah, and then you just wonder, okay, what was that? While you're having them, you don't necessarily ask that, but then afterwards, you're like, I don't know, was I hungry? Did I not eat enough? And suddenly saw God in a mushroom, wasn't it? So I've had some experiences that I wonder about. And but in terms of the East West question, to come back to what I said earlier, I think yeah, it's an experience that I guess people in Europe no longer can have of growing up in a religious society, a society where the
Ah,
default mode is belief in a greater order, belief in some kind of providence, belief in some kind of divine intelligence. All of that could be bullshit, but it's still an interesting fundamental difference, I think, in yeah, how you see the world. If you grow up, even if you end up not believing in God, if this is the framing of your experience, I think that's different to growing up in a society where the default is the opposite, where the strange thing is to believe in God. And they're like, okay. So I think that in some ways has affected me in terms of East West. I don't know how, but I'm sure it has. And in terms of moving around, I think the major thing, positive thing that's done for me is it's made me aware of just the contingency of so much of what we believe and care about. Um, as you move from culture to,
contingency
it just
on
depends where
what?
you were born, on your history, on
Ah,
so much of what we care about and we take to be gospel truth. You just move from one continent to another and you suddenly realize there is gospel truth here as well, but it's the opposite. And when you're 14, you're like, what do I do now? Like, well, which because before then you're like, okay, there is one gospel truth because you're embedded in one culture. And that's the positive is yeah, flexibility, humility, maybe a little bit about my own beliefs. The downside is you can be a bit lost because it's not so clear. Then this is the way to live because you're like, well, he's damn sure that's the way to live, but I know other people who are damn sure that they should live in an opposite way, and then you're not really sure anymore. Yeah, what you should do. But on balance, yeah, I think that's a big thing that sort of moving around has done for me. Just made me unsure about things.
lovely. And when you do your work,
Mm-hmm.
coaching, workshops, supporting academia, um, do does the starting point of religion, spirituality, beliefs, or lack thereof matter? Is there sort of a, does it matter where you start with, in terms of, I'm in Hamburg, I'm in
Mm-hmm.
Delhi, I'm in Paris, I'm
Yeah,
in Brighton. Does it,
yeah.
are there things in common? Do you take people on journeys that include, because you're sort of asking questions about
Mm-hmm.
how people find meaning,
Mm-hmm.
what their beliefs are, what their, does it matter where you start, or
So
are
yeah, I
we
mean, so
all
initially I was shaking my
actually?
yeah, yeah, both. I think. I mean, so initially I was shaking my head because I thought the question was going a different direction, um, but it does matter where people start. And I mean, my view on education and all of this is a form of education, really, but not in a grand sense. But it's just yeah, your the ideal form of education would be completely bespoke for each individual person. Because everyone is in a different place and what speaks to a person and what they need. So here's an example from my own life. 23, I had this depression in London, and I had a kind of, I basically it was too much, and I went to hospital and I had lots of therapy and so on, and I had cognitive behavioral therapy. And this was before I'd had this. I had the view of therapy that, in principle, fine. I'm sure it's helpful, but not for me. It's not. I had this cognitive behavioral therapy, incredibly helpful. right? It really found a therapist I clicked with, brilliant. 15 years later, I had another depressive episode, and I knew that cognitive behavioral therapy was not what I needed at that particular time. I knew that I was in a different place. I knew that I had different resources. I knew that I needed something different. And the point of this oversharing is just to say teaching is a bit like that, or working with people is a bit like that. For one person in one moment, cognitive behavioral therapy is amazing. For the other person, it might destroy the little flower that could bloom. And so it matters always where someone starts from, I feel. But I think this what's going on here is an example of this actually, and I guess you found this in your podcast. I found in my work that whether it's with groups or with individuals, if you truly listen, people sense this. People feel this even if they can't articulate it. And if you're truly open to what you're listening to, people sense that too. They sense the absence of judgment. They sense the absence of, I don't know, or maybe they sense the presence of safety. I don't know what, but they sense something. And in that kind of relation, I will be given whatever information I need to do the work I need to do with that particular group or that particular person at that particular time. So the universal thing I found is more to do with how I approach people, really. If I'm open and listening, I will be able to tap into whatever it is that is necessary at that moment. But what is necessary at that moment is very, very, very different. But I don't think in terms of, I don't know, cultural differences or religious differences, etc. That, yeah, I just don't think in those categories when I do my work. I think if I did, I would be able to say things about how there are differences. But the way I think about my work is really in terms of being present to what's there.
And it's remarkable, and it may be we're just totally a cognitive bias about the people who happen to have come on the show, but 30 episodes, everybody's totally different, but what we're not doing is being the church of I've got the answer, not being the church of you follow this process, you follow these steps, and whether we get clinicians or chief execs or unemployed people or whoever, when you do the first person bit, you being in the moment, listening, being aware, being conscious, are just they. Maybe there's some universality that doesn't involve all this mechanics of industrial apparatus that
yeah,
you know
yeah. And it maybe something
we
quite
put on
simple, at least
top.
partially quite simple. Yeah, I don't know. It seems fairly simple as human beings. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to touch other people. We want to feel real connection, and we don't get that very much. And when we do, there may be initial fear, but God, we want it. So as soon as
Yeah,
we get
and
something that feels a bit
we
like
just
it,
before
we're gone.
August our August recess, we sent an email out saying we'd like to hear some more stories. Please, if you'd like to come on the show, here's what the show has been about. We don't really want to judge, whether you've got. There's no such thing as a good story or a bad story, or just, we're going to put you in the centre. Just have a
Yeah,
chat. And the response has been amazing. It's
yeah,
just like, I
yeah,
think you're right. I think people want to be given permission to share their stories. I mean, even the
yeah,
ones that go, we've had people on the podcast, often it's like, I don't normally like talking about myself.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Until you give them permission, and then it's like, wow, okay, actually,
yeah,
you just need to feel safe. You just need to feel trusted, and
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
not going to be
Yeah.
humiliated.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's one other thing I found in addition to that, which is so that's one step. I feel that you need to feel safe and trusted. The additional thing I found is, and that deepens it, is if it turns into a real two-way thing, right? So if it's a so one situation is there's a listener and that there's a speaker, and the listener is open and present and non-judging, let's say, and the speaker speaks, and that's already a lot. That's not normal if you have that situation. But if you then get a situation where both are inhabiting both roles, right? That can be, I don't know, really a step change in the quality of the interaction and in the quality of what happens after it as well. And that's nothing. That's not an objection to what you said. It's just an addition. That
Both
in my
roles. What
experience.
do you mean by that? Just unpick
So
that a bit for us.
so what I mean is, here, let's say schematically, I'm the one opening up to some extent, and the two of you are the people listening schematically. And those are the two roles, and that's already really good if you can do this. But the next step I found is if we were both doing both, if it was a exchange in this sense, and I found that kind of has an exponential effect on what goes on in these conversations if you
Yeah,
can
and it
inhabit
is
both
because
roles.
moments in the conversation where we go, yeah, and I want to share this, and Annabelle says like she wants to.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it is an exchange, and that
Mm-hmm.
idea of the value exchange it's not an economic, it is a
Mm-hmm.
social, it is an
Mm-hmm.
environmental, it's a human
Yeah.
exchange that we're actually all in this together. You know,
Yeah.
not
Mm-hmm.
we're not customers or suppliers. We are,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
fellow travelers in some way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Can I? Sorry.
Annabelle,
Can I say
go on.
one
Yeah.
thing? Just there wasn't a smooth time to say this, but just something that shits me. Am I allowed to say that? No. To be in
Say
my
what you
bonnet.
like.
That so just to say it. So this bit about being non-judgmental and listening and so on that I try to do in my work. That's sometimes taken to imply that I don't know that there's nothing that a philosopher or a philosophy has to offer substantively. Like it's kind of like, okay, well, I'll sit and listen. I'm not going to tell you what's right or wrong, and what I'm doing is just listening. And that bit shits me. You guys didn't do this, but I just want to sort of kind of say this explicitly. And it's the interesting it's the interesting tension of the work in a way to stand by the knowledge and the expertise that you think you have, right? Because there's something that you're bringing that's worth something. Otherwise, you shouldn't be bringing it beyond. Otherwise, you should advertise yourself as, "Hey, I'm a good listener." If you're advertising yourself as something beyond this, there should be something substantive that you're bringing that goes beyond it. And there's this kind of tension between being able to be fully open to someone while at the same time being able to say, "Hey, that bit there, how about this? That seems for this reason mistaken to me." Or maybe there's a contradiction here in what you're saying. Do you agree, etc., etc.? And somehow I found maybe it's a bit like being a parent actually, and both are necessary. It's not just the group hug of saying everything you say is okay. Like everything you say is okay in a fundamental way. But part of that is being able to trust that the other person will call you out on your bullshit, and then you can really kind of feel free to speak in a conversation. So I don't know if I've made sense here, but I kind of want to insist that it's there's some expertise going on as well. I know things, damn it. it's what I want to say. Yeah.
You think you know things, yeah.
I think I know things. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm
Yeah.
joking.
Actually, I don't even need to go that far. Or rather, we can put it this way: that you can authentically react to things. You can say, "Look, I think that's wrong," or "I think that's I don't know, unkind." Or whatever it is. And that's actually part of the authentic encounter and part of what you're bringing to it. Being open is not the same as just saying everything you say is great or do is great. But sorry, Rob, I interrupted because of this
No, and I
little
think
bee in my bonnet.
I feel there's a definite. I've seen not loads of it, but a bit of that out there, particularly in the hideous world of social media, where people are like, we really need to learn to be able to just be open, discuss, say things that we disagree with, and not turn it into World War Three. You know, it's
Yeah.
allowed. It's like when you were
Yeah.
talking about. You know, you've traveled the world, and what you realize is that it's different all over the place. And the thing that, you know, controversial subject, but gun law in the States, and I cannot get my head around it at all. But then I
Yeah.
had a friend who wasn't American but lived in the States, and she lived in Texas, so the heart of the gun law states. And she was she tried to explain to me, you know, it's just a fundamental thing. It's a right. It's inbuilt in the culture. It's just, you know, people do not see what's wrong with it, even though, you know, all the statistics you could throw at it compared to, it's just not. That's just how it is there, and I have to accept that. I can call it out and go, it's
Yeah.
mental, it's mad, and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And I, you know,
Yeah.
and it's almost like Brexit as well. You know, I have friends who voted for Brexit, and they'll have their
Yeah.
own reasons for doing it. I fundamentally disagreed with it, but just,
Yeah.
you know, it's they're not idiots. You know, they're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
stupid. They're not racist. They're not, you know, you know, they, for whatever
Yeah.
reasons, they decided it was what they wanted to do, and it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
accept that to the level you can accept it, but disagreement
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
okay. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
necessary. It's
Yeah.
necessary to move everybody on, because no
Yeah.
end is right, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. I
anyway.
couldn't agree more with that.
Mm,
I think there's an art to disagreement. Yeah.
mm,
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people that come to the podcast expecting a little soundbite answer or two are going to be disappointed. People that come to the podcast that want pause, they want to be able to just take a moment to reflect and question, um, you know, what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it. I mean, you know, that is the point, is just to give people permission to take
Mm.
time out. And you know, I think it we're full of we live in a world full of lines and barriers and demarcation, you know, whether that's, you know, Pranay, your experience of one nation state to another and different sets of
Mm.
reality, or one company or one village or one family, you know, or one religion. And the thing is that if we did take a little bit more pause, you know, without the cultural shopping or the sort of, you know, the snipping around to do
Mm.
something temporarily, at one level we're all deeply connected, and if we take some moments to pause, then we'd all be richer, you know,
Mm.
in more of a spiritual way than a financial. But you know, by actually learning that people are different, and there must be more in common than more in difference between somebody that supports gun law and somebody doesn't, and surely that we can actually build a divide to be able to talk to people who support, you know,
Mm.
bearing
Mm.
arms personally.
Mm.
Although I
Mm.
don't get it either, but that's not
Yeah.
that's you know that's reality. Annabelle,
Mm.
what about questions for Pranay? I've dominated with some pretty tough
No,
ones,
well,
but
I guess the other, but sorry, rather than a question, just another observation is that I don't know why or how this happens, but you know, in the last 36 hours, we've recorded two other podcasts, and sort of the connections are always quite amazing, because so we've talked about education, we talked about and not in the last 48 hours, but Jainism as well, and the importance of that
Oh, okay.
cultural element. We've
Mm.
talked about you know, no judgment, or judgment, you know, disagreement. And
Mm.
then the other one that came to mind was, where does empathy fit with all this? Because yeah, again, the story about the gun law there, it's like, how do you you know, position yourself so you can not accept what other people are doing, but you
Mm.
know, create that platform to
understand.
understand, yeah,
Mm.
and then, you know, if you so wish to do so, influence to move in what you might
Mm.
consider the right direction, take a bit of
Mm.
action if you need to, you know, if you want
Mm.
to, if that matters to you, if that could really help other people. But where do you sit on empathy?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, I don't know if I'm inventing this term, but I think one of the things that philosophy is really good at is teaching cognitive empathy, by which I mean you start seeing, I don't know, any view you can think of in philosophy, there's someone very intelligent who believes the opposite. Right, so is there free will? There's a genius who's argued there's free will. There's another genius who's argued that there isn't. Is there a God? Dun, dun. Everything, capitalism, communism, and these are all very smart people, and they've not just pulled this out of their bottoms. They've thought about this a lot, and they've come to opposite conclusions. And in studying philosophy, you kind of see, okay, you start from a certain set of premises, you interpret them in a certain way, you end up with free will. You start from a slightly different set of premises, slightly different interpretation of them, you end up no free will. And you just repeat this, and then you develop the ability to have cognitive empathy. So in the case of the gun person, possible, I think it would be possible to learn, okay, I can try to understand why they judge gun owning to be okay. I don't have to endorse their premises. I don't endorse their premises, but I can understand what took them from here to there, and I can understand maybe why they started from that. And I think that's a useful, very useful skill. When it comes to empathy, feeling empathy, I don't know. It's just, it's not my professional area. I guess as a human being, you're an expert, or should be an expert in empathy anyway. But in terms of cultivating, the ability to feel what you feel in a given situation, I don't have too much
I'd
to
say
say about it.
brilliantly articulated as a philosopher in a way I'd never think of the word empathy, which is brilliant because cognitive empathy, emotional empathy. People just say empathy. It's like, what do you mean by that? And you kind of reflected that in your answer, which I think is a beautiful answer in its own right. It could cause me to think about empathy in a different way.
And thank you.
Yeah, no, interesting.
Annabelle?
So go on.
I just want to say with the emotional empathy part of it, I wonder if it's always useful. I know that it's taken generally or often to always be useful, but I'm thinking, I spoke about my son. At lunch, he started playing on the kitchen floor and he wanted water in one of his pans. And I said no, because I know what's going to happen. He's going to pour it over the kitchen floor and then I have to tidy it up. And I really didn't want to tidy it up. And so I said, no, right here, you're going to throw it over. And he was really sad, right? Really sad, bawling. Not for very long, but bawling. And it was useful to not be able to feel his feelings, because I could then deal with the situation in a different way. I could acknowledge his feelings, I could feel sympathy for them. But if I'd felt the same way as he did, which is what I take empathy to be, I'm not sure I'd have been such a good agent in that situation. So I'm not sure that emotional empathy is always good. You may want sometimes the ability to not feel agony just so you can respond to agony. Because if you're both, but this is just a random thought. It's not.
You're so mean, Pranay.
That's what my son thought. That's what my son thought for a while. Yeah,
I'm with him. More mess the better.
He doesn't think of it as mess. I mean, for him, it's not mess. He was cooking. This was.
Exactly.
Yeah, my baby son, who's now 19, cooked dinner for us last night, and it was my turn to clean up. And so I'm not a cook. I don't cook, but I do clean up, and he does rather make my cleaning up really meaty. Everywhere, top, bottom, every surface, every item.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the time because we're 50 minutes in. I feel it would be remiss of us not to come back to what you're doing now and what the future is holding for you with the philosophy practice, and just understand, how can anybody help? How can we help? What's where's that going, and what would be good outcomes for you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
In the next few months.
Yeah. So it's been about a year, as you said at the top, of leaving the university and trying to do philosophy in the real world. And yeah, it's going well. It's taken a while to build, but it's going well. And what I do, if I try to sum it up, is I try to help organizations just think better about important things, right? Because that's what I take to be my core philosophical expertise. And within that, I think a lot about meaning and purpose because I did my postdoc research on this. But in general terms, the places I can help are basically anywhere where people want to think more clearly, or think harder, or ask uncomfortable questions about meaning and purpose. Yeah. I should have prepared this better.
Where do you hang out, and we'll put some links in the podcast.
Right. I've got a
you.
website. I can give you a website, and
we'll put the website link in the notes.
Yeah, and I have a LinkedIn that I'm reasonably active on sporadically, so you can get in touch with me there as well. Those are the two places. And the website is more articulate than I've just been, so people should go have a look at that if they're intrigued by thinking better. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for putting up with my very probing questions.
Pleasure. Pleasure.
Really insightful talking to you as always, and look forward to developing our relationship and having you back on the show as we go forward. Thank you very much for me.
Yeah.
It's gonna
thank you, Rob. Thank you, Annabelle. Yeah. Thank you.